Hello and welcome to the NFL Blitz, the defense analysis podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50, talking about some of your favorite plays, and of course a lot of them are my favorite plays as well. Starting off with the Seattle Seahawks against the Rams. Monster spread, of course, 13.5 points. Two teams that gone completely opposite directions since the beginning of the season when the Rams actually beat the Seahawks. But I just don't see a scenario where, aside from the world coming to an end and or Russell Wilson retiring for no reason, that they have a chance to win this game. And Seattle, as you know, looking like the team that we saw in the Super Bowl last year, finally, after a sluggish start over the first 6 or 7 weeks. And everyone only wants to talk about Cam Newton, but Russell Wilson has been a god among men over the past month or so.
Yeah, and he's not turning the ball over at all. He's throwing a ton of touchdown passes. He's staking them to that defense to big leads. And the defense, if you stake them to a big lead, let them pin their ears back, let the Legion of Boom do what they do, and they're a scary defense. The other thing is this Rams offense is not built to play catch up. So if Russell Wilson continues his toward stretch, which I expect, which odds makers expect with a 13.5 point spread, that means that the Rams are stuck with Case Keenum throwing into the Legion of Boom. And to that, I say good luck, Case Keenum. Tip my cap to you. The Todd Gurley show is going to be rather disappointing. I think this week, the Seahawks have been great against the run. They're one of the toughest teams defending the run. And that is the Rams offense in a nutshell. If they can't run the football, they're going to have a hard time doing anything. And odds makers, again, you know this. It's why there's a spread on this game. And while I don't like to get into revenge narrative and things of that nature, this is the type of brash secondary, this is the type of brash team that I think really likes playing with a chip on their shoulder. They remember that they lost a season opener to the Rams. I think this is a game where they're going to want to punish the Rams and kind of get that bad taste out of their mouth from that early season loss. They probably, looking back, are shaking their head and wondering how the hell did they lose that season opener anyway. So really like this defense. I think they have arguably the highest floor on the slate, but they're my second favorite defense because the other elite defense in this group is hands down my favorite. I think their ceiling is unmatched.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a phenomenal spot for them here. Next up, the Chiefs. The chalk of the past week certainly didn't disappoint with the dominant performance. Now they get Johnny Manziel, so if you're one of the target the at Johnny Manziel or verse, wherever it may be, the venue, which I am, then the Chiefs are another one of those just easy picks this week. You click on them and you don't really have to think twice about it. Yes, there's other viable options, but you don't feel like there's much of a chance of a big-time letdown from the Chiefs.
Yeah, this is that high ceiling defense that I was alluding to, closing the remarks on the Seahawks. The Chiefs are just unbelievable. They're forcing multiple turnovers a game. They're recording a ton of sacks. They rank within the top 5 of the league in both categories. They're not allowing a lot of yards per play. They're not allowing a lot of points per game. They are absolutely clicking on all cylinders. They're facing a running attack that, other than their aberration game against the 49ers, can't get out of its own way. They got Johnny Manziel at quarterback, who has at times looked passable, but we're still talking about a second-year quarterback with a limited number of snaps in live game action, and he's facing arguably the best defense in football right now in Kansas City. The deck is completely stacked against him. The Browns have turned the ball over a ton this year, and they've allowed a ton of sacks, the third most sacks allowed in the league at 46. The Chiefs get after it. That is just a perfect combination. And I'm obviously not chasing the 2 defensive touchdowns last week, but this defense has that in them, especially against a turnover-prone team like this, and especially against a team that's going to be stuck playing catch-up really quickly. They struggle defending the run. The Chiefs have 2 talented running backs in Charkandrick West and Spencer Ware, who can stake them to a big lead by just pummeling the ball down their throat. And once that happens, watch these guys pin their ears back and get after it. And I love the ceiling. And again, they also have a really high floor. To me, they're a no doubt top defense on the slate.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And then a team that by default, due to the suspension, assuming he doesn't win his appeal, I don't think that he will, but I don't know. I'm not an NFL attorney. Odell Beckham Jr., obviously suspended for this game. Now it's the Vikings against the Giants, who essentially are Odell Beckham Jr. You got Eli Manning, who's having a good season. A lot of that due to the fact that all he has to do is get the ball to number 13, and he does all the work for him. He has had some success at times with some other guys. Ruben Randall's had a couple decent games, things like that. Will Tye, I guess. Rashad Jennings is running well, but this is a good Vikings defense, and without a one go-to guy, the Vikings don't have to key on taking that one player out of the game. They can focus on a team defensive effort, and I mean, they're the epitome of team defense and team offense. They don't have any, huge. I mean, they've got Adrian Peterson, but even he isn't out here putting up 150 yards a game. I mean, it's been a balanced effort across the board for the Vikings, and perfect scenario for them to succeed this week.
Yeah, I mean, Ruben Randall's been miscast as a number 2 receiver all year, and he's going to be bumped up to number 1 receiver duties. That's not going to work out well for Eli Manning, who is an erratic passer who has really relied on Odell Beckham Jr. making tough catches, being able to go and get the football, being able to do a lot with it after the catch. They don't have another explosive playmaker like that on their offense. And while Will Ties looked good in the second half of the season, we're not talking about a dynamic, game-changing tight end either. So that offense is stale without OBJ. Eli Manning, I think we're going to see more of the head-scratching Eli Manning than the guy who looks sharp and led that comeback. I think we're going to see the guy that threw the baffling interception into the end zone as opposed to, through the 4 touchdown passes that he had last week. And that plays right into the hands of the Vikings. And I like this defense at DraftKings, especially at $2,500. I think the floor is really high for that price. And if they get guys like Anthony Barr back this week, then I think the ceiling's also quite high for a team that's allowing less than 20 points per game and can get after the quarterback a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely like that spot. Next up, you've got the Titans, and much respect to the GOAT, Brian Hoyer. You did say here it's contingent on him not playing. Of course, he's a substantial upgrade from now TJ Yates out, Brandon Whedon, whoever else they bring in off the street to back him up this week. So he has not passed concussion protocol yet, so it looks like he's probably not going to play. And it's a Titans defense that's an adequate defense. I mean, the Patriots did handle them last week, but it wasn't a dominant offensive performance from the Patriots, not a Patriots-esque type of performance. So certainly a team that can hold their own, and this is not a good Texas offense without Brian Hoyer. I mean, you got Alfred Blue, who had a big game this week. Jonathan Grimes really has looked better than him. They don't have a consistent running game, and you've got DeAndre Hopkins, and this is the scenario where you say, okay, go out there, stop DeAndre Hopkins, good luck with the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Whedon didn't do a heck of a lot as a Cowboy, and the fact is they turned to Matt Castle over him, and I think that's a pretty good indictment of the talent level or lack thereof of Brandon Whedon, and I think you can take away DeAndre Hopkins from a bad quarterback like Whedon, again, assuming he's starting. Hoyer was meeting with a neurologist today, Tuesday, reportedly, but at this time we don't have any news on how that meeting went, like where he is in the concussion protocol. But considering he's had multiple concussions in a tight span, usually guys like that end up in the concussion protocol a little bit longer and have some issues getting out of it. But I mean, that offense is a one-man show. It is it's not Brandon Whedon. It's DeAndre Hopkins, and he's completely reliant on having a guy to get him the football. TJ Yates could get him the football down the field. Brian Hoyer's gotten him the football down the field. But I don't trust Brandon Whedon can get him the football down the field. And that means that you're relying on a running game that was led by Alfred Blue last week. And you mentioned that he had a good game rushing. But looking a little bit deeper into the numbers, he had one 41-yard run that really skewed the numbers. He carried the ball for 56 yards on his other 19 carries. And that is the Alfred Blue that we all know, a guy who plods for just over 3 yards per carry and does little else. So that is an offense that shouldn't put points on the board. The Titans can actually get after the quarterback. Their 37 sacks ranks highly within the league. So they are a team that can at least pile up some points that way. And at the minimum salary on both sides, the bar is super low for them to return value on the investment, and that's all you're looking for from them. You're not looking for a super high ceiling, but you're getting a team that's going to give you a ton of salary relief to spend on whatever you want around the rest of your lineup and not really hurt your roster, basically.
Yeah, I definitely like that. A low-risk type of play. Next up, the Denver Broncos against the Cincinnati Bengals. This one, as you and I were mentioning before the show, looks like it's all set up to be a defensive slugfest. Both teams good defenses. Both teams dealing right now with backup quarterbacks as well and inconsistencies on offense. So really it's going to come down to, as far as who's going to win here, is Brock Osweiler getting the ball to Sanders or Thomas, or is A.J. McCarron going to get the ball to A.J. Green or Tyler Eifert if he plays. I mean, it's someone's going to have to make a big play, but you just don't bank on either one of these offenses putting up big numbers in this one.
No, and the odds makers don't either. 40.5 over/under total on this game. So I think that really sets the floor very high for both defenses. I was torn between which defense to feature for the GPP plays, but ultimately went with the Broncos because they are tied for the league lead in sacks on the season. They do rank well in turnovers forced. They lead the league in yards allowed per play at just 4.4, and they're at home, which does matter. The traveling teams do tend to not do as well as the home team. So 3.5 spread. Broncos are small favorites, and I think there's a nice combination of floor and ceiling here. If A.J. McCarron's a little bit overmatched, the secondary can certainly take advantage of that. They can get after the quarterback too. They did struggle to run the ball last week against the 49ers with McCarron under center. Really weren't churning out much yardage with Giovanni Bernard or Jeremy Hill. So I do think this is a defensive slugfest, and ultimately I went with the home team in the slight favor here. But I think the floors are high for both teams, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one of the easier plays of the week, if you're going GPP route, the undefeated Carolina Panthers facing a team that they beat 38-0 a few weeks ago. Somehow a spread of 7 points. I know the Falcons played better this week, but I mean, I guess that if you're going to take the ultimate shot in the dark to try to win a money line bet, maybe you take the Falcons. But I mean, they just have not looked consistently good. The Panthers have looked consistently good, and that defense against Cam Newton, we already saw it the first time, and I mean, he is a man on a mission and does not look like he's going to be stopped anytime soon.
Yeah, and I mean, the Carolina Panthers have had 2 hiccups defensively in the last 3 weeks. But as you noted, sandwiched around that was that 38-0 shutout. And Matt Ryan's looked terrible this year. They inexplicably didn't move Julio Jones around much in that first matchup. They just let him sit out there on an island with Josh Norman. And Josh Norman did what Josh Norman does. And he kept the number 1 receiver for the Falcons in check. And without Julio Jones doing much, there's not a lot left in that offense. Devontae Freeman's been good this year, but he's really cooled off after a hot start. He's their number 2 in the passing attack, which kind of says volumes about the passing attack when your running back's your number 2 receiver. But this Panthers defense, even with the hiccups, they still allow fewer than 20 points per game. They rank well in terms of sacks and turnovers forced, so they can really pile up some points in a hurry. 4th in sacks, and they force the most turnovers in the league. So, I mean, this is a defense that when you're chasing ceiling, you chase turnovers, you chase sacks, and they get them in spades in Carolina. The Panthers have just been awesome this year in terms of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a team who's quietly been a pretty good defense, the Pittsburgh Steelers, facing off against the Ravens. And in years past, this would have been an exciting battle in Week 16. It'd likely be for a playoff spot, if not for the division title. Now this week, it's for the Steelers, still kind of battling for their playoff lives. Big win against the Broncos last week, but still sitting in that 6th seed. And it's almost like the teams ahead of them kind of hope they keep winning so that a team, sitting in the 2 seed or the 3 seed doesn't have to play the Steelers in the first round, because nobody wants to play this team right now, and including the Ravens. But, I mean, you just can't envision a scenario where the Ravens compete in this one because they're just sincerely outmatched right now.
Yeah, and that Steelers offense, I think, is really what's going to fuel this defense having a good showing this week. The offense has scored 30 or more points in something like, I believe it's 6 or 7 straight games at this point. They are clicking on all cylinders. They're going to hang a number against a really bad Ravens secondary that's had no answer for passing games. I mean, that's where the bread's been buttered for the Steelers this year, is Big Ben airing it out to Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Marcus Wheaton, D'Angelo Williams out of the backfield, Heath Miller up the slot, up the seam. He's got just an embarrassment of riches to throw to. D'Angelo Williams has been good on the ground as well, so they do have some balance, but this passing attack is going to be able to absolutely carve up that Ravens secondary, and they're 10.5-point favorites on the road. They're going to race out to that big lead, and the Ravens' offense at this point is reliant on having some kind of a running game. Buck Allen ended up in the doghouse and only played 9 offensive snaps last week. I expect them to retake that lion's share of playing time again, since, they really don't need to evaluate Terrence West at this point. He doesn't really have much of a long-term future as a starter on that team, but Buck Allen might. Regardless, the Steelers have been good against the run this year. They're very giving in the past, but if you're expecting Jimmy Clausen to be the quarterback that exploits that, I'm not really sure what Jimmy Clausen you've been watching in a coma since his Notre Dame days, and you think he's a little bit different guy than he is. But he's not the guy to pick apart the secondary. Kamar Aiken's been good, but they really don't have the weapons to pick apart the cornerbacks either. So once the Steelers get out to this lead, that bend but don't break defense, it's good at forcing turnovers, good at getting sacks, it's going to do they do well, and they're not going to give up the chunk yardage like they have to other better offenses this year. So, I mean, with the bend but don't break defense, I hate using them against good offenses because they have implosion potential like they did against the Broncos last week. But against bad offenses, I have no problem taking on a team that takes chances and wreaks havoc on opposing defenses by taking those chances. So I like the Steelers this week, especially at DraftKings where they're only $3,100.
Yeah, and it's not likely that Jimmy Clausen's going to throw a Hail Mary touchdown at the end of the first half in this one to kill those numbers either. Houston Texans last up here against the Titans, and originally reported Marcus Mariota out for the season. Now they're saying he's not. I don't know why the hell you'd play this guy week 17 anyway with your team already out of it. All you're really going to do is bump yourself down the draft board, but you want to take that chance, that's not my responsibility. I don't own the Titans, or at least not yet. Maybe one day. But either way, you got Zach Mettenberger under center, who has not made a lot of starts in his career, but has made a couple starts against the Texans, and they did not go very well. J.J. Watt was not very kind to him. This defense wasn't, and the Texans a lot to play for. Huge win last week, now in the driver's seat to win this division kind of by default and get Brian Hoyer that well-deserved playoff berth.
Yeah, and I mean, Mettenberger's not only struggled against the Texans, but this year he's had 3 games where he's thrown the ball double-digit times. Last week was in relief, so it wasn't a start. But in those 3 games, he's thrown 5 picks. He's good for almost 2 picks a game, which is just remarkable. I mean, when you're starting with that as a defense and the Texans can force turnovers, that's a good starting point, and they can get after the quarterback too, and do so against a offensive line that's had no luck protecting quarterbacks this year. The Titans are tied for the most sacks allowed this season with 49 of them, tied with the 49ers. So, and that's with a mobile quarterback behind center most of the year. That's with Marcus Mariota back there. Zach Mettenberger is not Marcus Mariota from a movement standpoint. He's not Marcus Mariota from a lot of standpoints, but
he's taller. That's it.
Yeah, he's not eluding pass rushers, and he's not making good decisions with the football, which is exactly what you want your DFS defense to be facing as an immobile quarterback who makes bad decisions with the football. At $2,800 on DraftKings, the Texans are a great source of salary relief. And at $5,000 on FanDuel, that's where you're going to get the low ownership in GPPs. So I even like them there just because of that low ownership percentage and the ceiling that comes with facing a Zach Mettenberger.
Yeah, exactly. There's one thing that Zach Mettenberger can do that Marcus Mariota cannot, and it's look like Matthew McConaughey. That's about the only thing he can do that Mariota cannot. But either way, that'll wrap things up here for us for this week. Find us on Twitter at DFCafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.